and welcome back to Groundswell. We're doing another session as part of our special series on the Farmer's Guardian podcast, brought to you by the School of Sustainable Food and Farming at Harper Adams University. This session is going to be about greenhouse gas emissions, a very broad topic, but I've got some fantastic panellists here who will walk us through the discussion. So first off, Ben, can you introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Ben Williams. I'm the sustainability manager for Leprino Foods. We manufacture mozzarella, and it's my job to make sure it's sustainable from farm to customer.
And Megan?
I'm Meg Powell. I'm a livestock sustainability specialist for the UK Agri-Tech Centre. I work on innovation and R&D within the livestock sector, and I'm also from a beef and sheep farm in Mid Wales, so very passionate.
And Dan?
Dan Smith. I'm a farmer and consultant from the Wye Valley, and I run a farm for the benefit of the environment and young people.
Perfect. For those looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, would you agree with the statement that the key initially is to find those, maybe say, win-win areas on farm, and where you can not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions but also ensure that you're improving profitability at the same time? What would you say? Discuss.
From a farmer's point of view, being conscious about it and really analysing what we're doing has changed how we look at our whole business. So actually making efficiencies across the whole board has been the biggest win for us, as well as the kind of public perception of what we do. So as a farmer, that's what I use it for, is efficiency across the board, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think efficiency has been the really, really key message in engaging with farmers. I think I saw something that ABP posted that about 20% of emissions could be reduced from efficiency gains alone. Yes. So it's a really, really huge kind of win there, and it's the win-win for farmers. But but also R&D and that sort of like the next step, it does also play a huge role there as well, and sort of taking that next step further away from efficiency.
Yeah, 20% is probably the figure we'd have from our baselining. I'd caution that absolutely it chimes with the farmer, but I don't know any of our farmers that wake up trying to be inefficient. And actually efficiency, or delivering their day-to-day as efficiently as possible, is what they strive to do.
Yeah.
So actually I think what we need to do is go back and look at what is stopping that further efficiency on farm. And some people might have a more natural mindset or bend to it than others, but actually we as an industry need to support farmers to find that next step, that sort of jump.
And what do you think those challenges are?
I think a lot of it can be infrastructure and lack of equipment as well. I know that particularly in certain supply chains in beef and sheep sectors, a lot of farmers don't yet have weighing scales and proper handling equipment, and slurry stores, things like that. They're just fundamental and actually helping them be efficient and reduce those emissions. So it's just getting those farmers to have that access to the equipment and infrastructure that's needed to help them be more efficient, essentially.
So Megan's mentioned that infrastructure and equipment. What do you?
I'd like to think we're farming in a fairly progressive way, and we're conscious of these things, but actually really taking a deep dive in doing calculations about our emissions, it did actually really help on the day-to-day. So having data, which I think comes down to weighing scales, a very basic thing. We might be a step ahead, but actually all of that data is power, and I'm interested in it, but I learnt loads as well. So I think it definitely helped the whole model, essentially.
And that's the point I really want to pick up on, is data collection and how critical that is in terms of driving down greenhouse gas emissions, being sustainable on farm. How crucial is that data collection?
Oh, it's massive. If you can't measure, you can't manage. So without a baseline, you're going nowhere. I'd say at an industry level, there are three macro barriers to change. So the elephant in the room is economics.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about it.
And that's something that's come up multiple times across all these sessions.
And I'll say that
Finances.
as a representative of a processor. It is something that we battle with. It is information. So data is worthless, but the information you gain from it, absolutely I agree with you, is valuable. But then the skill set to deploy that, some have it, some like it, some need support. And actually I'd argue the majority need support. We don't teach that skill set in colleges, we don't teach it in universities, and we don't really deliver it in industry. And without that, you can throw all the technology and all the data that you want at farmers, but you may as well pee into the wind because they can't use it.
We found that as a huge challenge, the longevity of technology on farms. A lot of these companies, R&D companies, universities, just processors are chucking money at giving farmers all this technology, which lasts a year, and then it's not, like you say, for the reason of them not knowing how to use it. It could be time, a multitude of reasons why it's not being utilised, but it's just working out, not just adopting that tech, but value and continuing to use it from,
Yeah, some really interesting.
Just picking up on something there actually in terms of social good and public services, people are interested in it, and I think in a way of getting farming or new skill into farming, I actually think we can really use this to our advantage, and there is a skill set growing. I'm just not sure as an industry we're quite utilising it to its optimum at the moment.
Yeah, great.
On your farm, Megan, what tools are you using to try and get a sense of kind of carbon capture, emissions on your farm?
So I would say that my family farm is probably an example of a farmer that's quite a traditional commercial farmer, if I'm honest. So they would be part of that kind of demographic within the supply chain that requires that extra step to kind of engage with. Yeah. So they are, in terms of like efficiency is the way forward for them, and I wouldn't say that they would be very engaged with using, my parents have been very engaged with that sustainability word. Yeah. So it's just really kind of like helping, like efficiency is what kind of like is what they're interested in. So at this stage, it's sort of kind of pushing it through that way, and then, but yeah, so they're the example of kind of they're going through the journey.
But I think that's really interesting because there are so many farmers starting on that journey, and actually sustainability and efficiency, they're the same thing, really. But they can be, can't they? But it kind of puts people off when you hear that term. Would you say?
I think it's just a bit of a stigma around sustainability. They just kind of think it means that it's reducing production, for example, when it's not. It's kind of a whole conjunction of things, and it's actually becoming the most resilient and economically sustainable business, and that's, yeah.
But it is a mindset change, isn't it, for some farmers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you're not profitable, then you're not sustainable. So you have to use it in the right way to make your farm efficient, but also profitable, and that's kind of where you have to look at it. And actually where this comes in for us is it's quite a powerful selling story. So because people are interested, we talk about profitability. If we can charge extra 40p a kilo for dead weight beef, whatever it happens to be, well that's using it as part of the process for us.
Ben, in terms of your partnership with farmers and producers, how are you engaging with them and so giving them that support?
So we fund carbon audits on farm for the baseline. We do that because arguably we needed the more data more than the farmers did. Yeah. So it felt right that we would do that. It's about 30% of our farms every year. From that we see what are the major sort of contributors to greenhouse gases, and then we either educate, directly fund short term where there is a small upfront cost. We develop trials where there is a lack of trust perhaps in the solution, and then we try and work on knowledge exchange, and we build that into a framework we call Reset. So it's a combination of behavioural levers, so what regulation is going to force you to do this, what economics are either in your benefit or actually would you lose out on if you don't, who are your social ambassadors for change, who do you look up to and who can we influence to make you want to do this, how do we educate, which is the one that is always under-resourced, and we always assume it's easy and it's not. Yep. And then, and only then, do we get to the T, which often is labelled as technology, but we call things. So doing things differently, thinking of things differently, sometimes technology. And farmers tend to like Tezza, but that's not very catchy. And so Reset is the way it works. And it's running from stick to carrot, because really that is what tends to drive change, but it's not biasing one or the other.
But I think trials are really important, isn't it? If farmers can visually see change happening and can see other farmers doing stuff and can learn from them, they are more likely to take on board, would you say, rather than being told what to do? Sometimes.
We did a really interesting piece of research through HDB where obviously the Monitor Farm platform is held up and it's quite rightly a beacon of really good practice because farmers like learning from other farmers. But the learning style is not necessarily tied directly to who is teaching. And actually, we assume farmers were pragmatists and as a learning style, wellies on and get stuck in and go in the field. But actually, when we asked the farmers to audit themselves through a blind study, they told us they are theorists. They want a story first. The reason the same 30% turn up to all of the Monitor Farm events and they keep turning up is A, they're the ones that do like learning that way. And the reason they keep turning up is you have to do each of the other styles to effectively learn. And they don't, because there's no support coming into or out of that. So I think trials are great, but you have to be able to use the reset, what is the burning platform to drive change, then move into that, then look at your outflow, your data, your so what, and look at the allies within the industry to make sure farmers are supported through change. Because if they're not going to, because they'd have done it on their own otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, farmers are incredibly proactive people. There's normally a reason they haven't changed.
I want to touch upon the livestock sector. Obviously, when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and livestock gets brought into it, obviously we talk about methane and that narrative around it. For livestock farmers, where should they be focusing on in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Ours was really clear, was bought in feed, you know, and actually because we were lucky enough we've got 6 farms, very different locations running under similar systems, we were able to analyse that across the board. And I was already using less feed than most of the other farms, but it was still actually on the calculations because of other reasons really significant. So we changed our model of how we were farming to make that more efficient. And
did any challenges come from that?
Oh, loads of challenges,
yeah,
plenty of challenges, but you know, then you get into the bigger thing of, you know, genetics and you know, efficiency, housing, grass management. But actually, when I was talking earlier about our whole system, that's what it's all about. And really, this was just the catalyst to make a lot of those changes with actual information, rather than a lot of this, which is almost anecdotally, you kind of do this and it'll be better. The fact that we were data-driven and continue to be data-driven, I think is really, really powerful. And it means that we can now go back and analyse again,
and
you can see where
data,
those changes are. So actually, I think it drives loads. And coming back to your point, I think the mindset thing is, and I know that I'm not necessarily within the norm of a lot of farmers, but I think the fact that we keep pushing and can prove some of this stuff with data, farmers will eventually come through, I hope.
What advice are you giving your farmers in terms of methane?
So we operate under 4 pillars for reducing overall carbon. So it's feed, fertility, fertiliser and fuels, with the first 3 being the biggest. So we had a handful of farms that are audited year on year. There was a chunk of those that actually saw a 25% fall in carbon footprint year on year. Each one cut soy out of the diet. They improved their yield from homegrown forage. They cleaved off the number of replacement young stock that were just sitting around that they really didn't need, and they cut fertiliser by 20%. Yep. Every single one of them did the same thing, and in each case they saw massive, almost that 30% by 2030 target in a year, in which case it's really achievable. And actually, in all of those cases, they saw a significant impact on their bottom line, positive impact on their bottom line.
One of the key focuses that in my previous role was for a retailer working on the beef supply chain. Again, falling back to kind of efficiency, but improved lifetime performance and age at slaughter was just the key kind of thing there to focus on, and it was quite a big win for farmers. And again, feed efficiency, feed conversion ratio, and genetics all kind of fed into that, and that's tangibly where we were seeing the biggest benefits, and farmers were able to kind of get to that. But then there was such challenges in facing then in terms of actually bringing that age at slaughter down. But then how do we do that in an extensive way? Thinking about regenerative farming, for example, it kind of didn't always work. So it's just not thinking about it holistically, thinking sometimes broader than just greenhouse gas emissions is really important in that respect. And then that'll sort of help farmers get that system that does fit the holistic view of sustainability. Talking
about feed, there, you know, in the pig sector, obviously, there's a drive for deforestation-free soya coming through, and you know the target is January next year, isn't it? That's coming, and you know it's an ambitious target to have with you know the market not quite there for it, and there's some real concerns. Well, who is going to pay for this? And farmers think, well, it's going to be down to them to pay for for this deforestation-free soya. And I just wondered what your views were on this.
I don't think farmers know that it's even coming, to be honest with you. It's probably one of the biggest pressures we face.
How would you even
audit it? from it? Well, there's that. We have some solutions, and to be fair, there are systems there. Delivering in 6 months is hard. I think from a dairy and beef point of view, the first thing to note is there's no requirement to feed soy or palm to either of those species, although there are challenges we have to open our eyes up to. The alternatives aren't completely without their problems and challenges. So we do have some opportunities, but the long and the short of it is, absolutely, people have known about this coming for a long time. There are bodies there that are elected to act in our best interests, and I think they've eaten scones and drunk tea and done nothing else, which might be a little controversial, but...
Yeah, the pig sector is really hard, actually. And coming back to your point, and challenges even within beef, you know, like when we first analysed what we were doing, reducing finishing times, but also reducing feed doesn't really go hand in hand. And I think the pig sector are going to struggle, and it comes back to this question of, do the public really care? Because if they did, they would pay for it, but the truth is they probably don't. And they're even less aware than the farmers that this change is coming. You know, and that's a real issue. It comes back to education, you know, and transparency.
And farmers are completely, obviously, on board with the idea. They want this deforestation-free soya, but they don't want to have to pay for it.
I don't know if they do.
Yeah, and I mean, having just spent 3 weeks in Brazil, I think it's a global issue. I think sometimes we look very at what we're doing when actually we should be potentially broadening as an industry in the UK. We should really be looking slightly further afield. But yeah.
I think farmers want to do the right thing. That's important.
That's what I'm saying. They do. Yeah.
But they want to make money.
And they're aware of that global scale. I mean, the amount of farmers I've spoken to, and we talk about this, and they go, but China is 40% of global demand. There is a real chance the boats will just turn left and go to China coming out of ports in South America rather than turning
in
the other direction.
There's a very strong chance of that.
Yeah, because a whole of Europe is 9% of total soy demand, in which case if we make it so hard, it just won't turn up. And I think farmers are more worried about, can I feed my cows, can I sell my milk, and can I be, continue the respect that, that I deserve for, producing a really high quality product. But I think they're very aware of actually where we sit on the world stage, and we do them an injustice, I think, of not giving them credit on that. That's why the conversation is so challenging, because they do feel like they're being definitely disadvantaged compared to a global market.
Yeah.
And that leads on to my next question in terms of British agriculture, British farming, the pressure that's being put on them in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and kind of leading the way within this field. Do you think that other industries, other sectors are being forgotten about and there's too much focus on agriculture, or should we, stay in our lane and carry on and just...
No, well, agriculture as a percentage of total UK emissions has increased, even though the total emissions from agriculture hasn't, because every other sector is doing their part. And actually, if we don't move forwards, we become more of the whipping boy, because actually we haven't done anything. We've buried our heads in the sand, and we just can't. At the end of the day, agriculture has a crucial role to play. And we can sit here looking out at the rolling green fields and say, how can this be blamed for destroying the planet? But when an Arctic load of nitram is backing into the field behind, or a load of soy is being put into a silage, into a feed bin, you can't defend that either. So we do have to clear up our own dirty laundry, but we also have to celebrate the good that we do. But we can't rest on our laurels on that either. We do have to take action.
I think just having the evidence behind us and what we're doing, a lot of farmers, I know certain supply chains...
communicating out there.
And a lot of certain supply chains are leading, dairy is leading, pigs and poultry are leading in terms of actually carbon footprinting. But I keep falling back to beef and sheep, obviously it's kind of what I know, but they are falling behind in terms of actually measuring their emissions in a lot of cases. And the supply chain is just quite fragmented. It just makes it a challenge to really get to the first part of the supply chain in a way. So it's just being able to evidence your improvements made to actually then show the benefits and
Just to turn it around from my point of view, we're facing a global issue. Why shouldn't we be the best industry? We're often talked about we need to do this, we need to do that. Actually, let's say we want to do this and we want to be the best at it and kind of celebrate that, and then hopefully other stuff falls into place around that.
I think celebrate that, but also what agriculture does. So we have various conversations, particularly further up the supply chain, and we always talk about agriculture as a food supplier. But agriculture is the food on your plate, the fuel in your car, the heat in your homes, the fibre in your back. When done right, the ecosystem services that literally keep the planet spinning, in which case we have such a pivotal role to play in those fields as well as food. We should celebrate those, but we need the data and the evidence of action to be allowed to come and play in those spaces.
And a consistent way of measuring that data.
I think consistent measuring, we get bogged down with this, we all need to use the same tool and various other bits and pieces.
What's your view on that?
They're all wrong, but they're all right enough to the same international standards that pick a tool and measure it, because whatever you're doing, you'll have to re-baseline multiple times in bits and pieces. Nobody really cares except about the direction that data is moving. It's the trend over time, and the longer you leave it, the longer it takes to have a trend, so just get on with it.
I also think we need a bit of competition in that area as well. I think if it was too uniform, I think it benefits from a bit of competition. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think it stagnates innovation if we don't.
I think having those consistent methodologies, though, is really important. Obviously, DEFRA commissioned the work with ADAS to look at the carbon calculators and kind of provide recommendations around how they can ensure the most accurate and consistent results. I think having that is important. And like you say, which tool the farmer uses is based on their own business and what's most important to them. But I think from an industry reporting perspective, eventually it would be great for individual farmers to feed their data into the industry reporting system in some way to be able to collect, like for collective reporting. And if we aren't confident in the results, then we can't do that. So from a benchmarking perspective, industry reporting, but from individual farm, yes, they're still seeing the most important hotspots and mitigation areas. So yeah,
that's important on a global scale as well. So we already see that we compete in Asia Pac with sort of New Zealand industry, with US industry, and actually at the moment the direction of travel and the plan behind it is what wins contract, wins the right to supply, which obviously then affects our, positively our milk price. It will come to a point where actually cold hard numbers are key, and you will have to have trust that the New Zealand model and the Irish model and the UK models are comparative enough that you're comparing apples and apples. Otherwise we start to lose business, because some are more creative than others maybe.
And just to, again, from a farmer point of view, I hear an awful lot about data. Now, a lot of farmers are very sceptical about where data goes and who owns data, and I think there's a bit of tidying up to do in that area. I think it was really highlighted in the SFS scheme when the Welsh Government were looking for benchmarking and looking for these calculations, and a lot of farmers were like, well, actually, whose is this data? Because it should be mine, I should own it, but it's kind of being put out there as and I think there is a bit of something to do there to give confidence.
It's transparency
to those
at the end of the day,
people.
is how that data is being utilised, that on-farm data.
And demonstrating value for it. I mean, the SFS is a great example. All farmers supply any 3 pieces of data into an unknown tool that will give an unknown thing back. I mean, just terrible sort of piece. What is the value for the farmer in doing it? We supply a benchmarking platform free of charge to every farmer and pay them to move their data, because there is a small amount of value in it. But it's worthless until it comes together, and then it's only really a benefit to them. But there's a huge amount of transparency, but also what is the value in doing it? Because otherwise, why would we move it? And I think as an industry, we need to be honest with why we want the data. We keep telling farmers, you need this data and that data and that. Farmers don't. They're awash with it. They've too much of it. Actually, we want the data, and we need to be honest about that.
And that point there, well, there's too much.
Oh, there's far too much.
So it's coming from all directions. If you're a dairy farmer, you've got your milk processor, you've got banks now asking for data, you've got, so many, you've got your red tractor. It's coming from all angles, and I think that is not helping things.
I think it's really important that, like you say, that the farmers need that one sort of space where they can report their data and it all kind of goes. I know that HDB have been trying to work on the livestock information for a long time, and it hasn't really. But that theory has so much potential, and it has been done. The HDB Medicines Hub, for example, is starting to kick off now, and all of the data in the Welsh from Welsh vets is being put automatically onto the Meds Hub. Something like that for other sort of environmental reporting and greenhouse gas reporting would be really, really useful.
I still think we as the industry are benefiting more from the farmer. So we did an exercise with the pig industry. There were 150 things that pig farmers were measuring. None of them were key performance indicators. And actually, if you can't understand whether your business is operating across sort of those key pillars of business with between 4 and 8 KPIs, then there's a deeper problem of sort of being able to understand how your business runs. And that's the difference. I think farmers need KPIs. We as an industry need to be able to say, look, we're safeguarding your reputation and I need a bit more depth to this, or I need more context, or I have to be able to demonstrate more trust. And then we show them the value through the access to the markets. But farmers themselves, we need to be really honest with them. They shouldn't be measuring all of this stuff. There should be maximum 8 key figures across any agricultural business. So profitability, productivity, yield, and health. And if you can't understand your business from those, there's a deeper problem.
Yeah,
that's it. Simple.
It's not the farmer's skill set. Farmers have to be enough things. They don't have to be a data analyst as well.
I think that's half the challenge, isn't it? It's the time that it takes up, but also it's not something that comes natural to some farmers.
The accessibility is a real problem. I mean, the reason we pulled the benchmarking platform together is we give farmers loads and loads of information, and a lot of it averages. And the average human being has got one breast and one other reproductive organ, and obviously, that's only me. So it's just not realistic to use. But for farmers to find that information is a whole other skill set. It's a whole other time allocation. So we need to make it easy. If you want somebody to push the door, take the handle off.
Yep.
Yeah,
Make it
exactly.
easy.
Yeah, 100%.
Make it so obvious
100%.
to do what they need to do. And I think that's how we need to move with data. Stop talking about data and start talking about information.
I was just going to say though, there's still a big challenge logistically, and loads of parts of rural areas in the UK still don't have don't even have network to say all this tech and data platforms.
We laugh about
it's not
it,
going to work.
but it's very true. You know, the ability to even submit data online, the technology isn't there, and that's a fundamental that's needed.
So I think the thing we've proved with the engagement with farmers so far to ourselves, and I say prove because we've got our own little echo chamber of self-affirmation, so use it loosely, is sustainability and progress at speed is a close contact sport. If you want to move fast and you really want to influence human beings, because it's human beings that make the change, you need human beings to influence. They learn best from peers, they're motivated by peers or allies or sort of compatriots within the industry, in which case there is a role for digital. But I'd argue we've over-egged because it tends to be cheaper, it tends to be less labour, and we put a lot of hope into it. But you want to move hard and fast by 2030, you've got to put boots on the ground. And that is an investment as an industry we have to make.
Yeah, because I think there is definitely a danger that you get the same audience which you've touched on, but often that audience might be in a very different place to the average, and I think there is an issue there. I think actually when you look
Completely.
at it.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up, but one question I wanted to end on, and it's quite a broad question, but where do you see the future of British agriculture? Who's first?
I mean, I'm currently doing a Nuffield on how do we get young people involved in agriculture through conversations like this, and I have a worry that we don't have enough young people driving innovation. I think we really need to look at recruitment, technology, all of those things are actually kind of growing in other industries, and I think we're leaving it behind slightly, and I think that's where ag is going. I'm not sure it's going there fast enough, basically.
So more focus on innovation and technology and
Yeah, I
driving
think for me that is driven by the people working within the industry, and I just don't think we focus enough on getting good people in and who can drive that change.
People are key.
Yeah, people are 100% key, and I think we've let that go for too long, and I ask everybody whose responsibility that is, and everybody says it's everyone else's. So I think that's the biggest piece for me. Yeah.
I'll be interested to read your Nuffield once it's finished. Megan.
So the industry will always be producing food. So we're still going to be producing food, but hopefully in a way that sort of benefits whole circular systems. So livestock, a bit more mixed sort of farming systems, regen principles that obviously they're built on the sort of those 100-year-old principles that have been going on, utilising innovation and technology to really take farming that step further, but bringing it that step back. I think livestock are really part of the solution, and kind of bringing that more diverse mixed farming systems is something I'd really like to see.
Yeah, I mean, it depends really much on the attitude that Dan sort of mentioned in the industry there. You know, there's the old parable of the three people, anybody, somebody and nobody. At the moment we see that, you know, there's jobs that need doing, anybody could do them, somebody should do them and nobody actually is. I think if we carry on like that, yeah, we'll still be producing food, but we'll start to lose market access because we're not doing the minimum requirement that's expected either consumer or legally. That said, if people step up, they stand up and be counted, and we see some real leadership, particularly from those who are meant to be supporting us, actually we will see ourselves not only thriving in our own industry, but generating the fuel in cars and the heat in homes and the fibre on back profitably, and actually starting to see a return for that. And that's a very different narrative. It's very, very difficult to withdraw that sort of engagement with food across the sectors, when actually it's making sure your Amazon delivery turns up the next day still and it's carbon negative.
And for any change, I think we don't need one leader, we need multiple leaders in the sector.
We need a lot.
Really driving it forward. That was really insightful discussion. Thank you ever so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day at Groundswell.
Thank you.